I was only 14 when I first saw the ledger. Not the big parish record Father Hanlon showed to parents at baptisms, all neat and proper with black ink and pressed ribbons, but the other one, the one that smelled of damp wood and mold, hidden behind a loose plank in the bell tower. I wasn't supposed to be there, of course. No one went up to the tower anymore. The bell rope had frayed years ago, and everyone said the ladder was unsafe. But I climbed it anyway because I liked the view. I liked to see the village roofs like little caps on stones and the crooked lane winding off toward the woods. That day, I found the plank half-rotted. When I tugged it, it splintered clean away, and behind it was a flat leather book tied with twine. My hands were dusty, and the leather left a black stain on my thumb. I opened it right there on the floorboards while the bell overhead groaned in the wind. The writing wasn't like Father Hanlon's tidy hand. This was scrawled and hurried. Names running together. I remember reading June 3rd, child, female, no family mark, buried as Ellen Graves. July 18th, infant, unknown, baptized under wrong kinship, buried as Thomas Meade. August 2nd, stillborn, unregistered, buried as William Kerr. I didn't understand. Why would children be buried under false names, I thought. Maybe it was a code, or maybe I was misreading. My schooling wasn't perfect, and some of the ink was smeared. But the more I looked, the clearer it became. Whoever wrote this book was recording burials that didn't match the names chiseled on the small, tilting stones in the churchyard. I felt a prickle at the back of my neck. The tower suddenly seemed too quiet, only the bell rope swaying, whispering, against the beam. I shoved the ledger back into its hollow and scrambled down the ladder so fast I burned my palms. That night, I tried to tell Ma about it. She hushed me before I'd even finished. "Don't go poking at parish matters, Rory," she said, stirring the pot on the stove. "There's nothing there for you but trouble." "But Ma," I insisted, "why would Father Hanlon write down wrong names?" Her spoon clattered against the iron pot. "Enough. You keep your nose clean and your eyes shut. God help us, boy, you want to end up like Patrick Gray?" I didn't know what she meant about Patrick Gray then. Only later did I learn he'd asked too many questions years ago, when the old cemetery wall was rebuilt, and one morning his family woke to find him gone. Folks said he'd run off to sea. Others said he'd fallen into the river drunk. No one ever found him. The next Sunday after Mass, I lingered by the church door. I watched Father Hanlon's eyes. They were small and sharp as tacks, and he smiled too much, like he was always trying to soften bad news before it came out. When old, Mrs. Cullen asked about her granddaughter's grave. I saw him touch her arm and murmur something that made her go pale. He hurried her along with a pat, but when he turned, he caught me staring. For a second, his smile vanished, and I felt pinned to the wall like a beetle. That afternoon, I walked through the churchyard. The graves of children were all crowded in. One corner, little stone markers crooked and weather-beaten. Some were just wooden crosses bleached gray. I traced the letters with my fingers. Ellen Graves, Thomas Meade, William Kerr, all the names from the ledger in order, just as they'd been written. The wind picked up and rattled the ash trees. I swear I heard whispering. Not real words, just soft sounds like dry grass moving. I told myself I was being foolish, but when I looked up, Father Hanlon was watching from the rectory window. He didn't wave. He just shut the curtain. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing those names, mismatched with children no one seemed to claim. Who were they? Foundlings? Travelers' babes? And why bury them under false names at all? I decided I'd go back to the tower, copy down more of the ledger, and figure it out myself. 2 days later, I climbed back up at dusk. My lantern cast a yellow circle on the floorboards. The ledger was still there, but the twine was cut, like someone else had been through it since I last looked. I turned the pages fast, my heart thudding. More names, more wrong burials. And, near the bottom, written darker than the rest, as though pressed hard with the pen, September 12th, male living sent away, no stone. My throat went dry. Living? Not buried? I didn't understand. Was this about a child still alive somewhere? I heard footsteps below, heavy ones on the church's wooden floor. Someone else was in the building. I snuffed my lantern and held my breath. The ladder creaked as if someone touched it, then stopped. A voice floated up, deep and calm. "Boy, come down now. Bring the book." I didn't move. My fingers dug into the pages. The voice came again, this time quieter, almost friendly. "It's not what you think, Rory. Don't make it worse for yourself." I waited until the footsteps retreated, then shoved the ledger back and scrambled down another way, through the side hatch and onto the roof. I slipped on the slates, nearly fell, and dropped into the nettles by the cemetery wall. My arms stung, but I ran all the way home. When I reached our cottage, Ma was waiting with her shawl over her head. She didn't ask where I'd been. She just locked the door and barred it, something she'd never done before. Then she blew out the lamp and whispered, "If anyone comes asking, you've been sick in bed all day. Do you hear me, Rory?" Her voice shook. I'd never heard my mother afraid of anything. Not the storms, not the tax collectors, not even the drunk men who sometimes shouted outside the inn. But that night she was pale as the moonlight. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my ears straining for every sound. Somewhere down the lane, a horse passed slow, its hooves muffled by the dirt road. The rider didn't call out, didn't whistle, just rode on in silence. By morning, the church bell tolled once, not for mass, not for a funeral. Just one long note that hung in the air like a warning, and I knew then the parish kept secrets deeper than the graves themselves. I didn't go near the churchyard for 3 days after that night. Ma wouldn't let me out of her sight even when I went to fetch water from the pump. Every time a cart rattled down the lane or someone rapped at the door, she'd stiffen like a hare hearing hounds. She didn't say a word about what she feared, but I could feel it thick in the air, the way you can feel thunder before you hear it. On the 4th evening, I decided I couldn't stand it anymore. If I stayed locked in the cottage pretending, nothing happened, I'd go mad. I told Ma I was walking to the mill pond to see if the ice had broken yet, and she just nodded, too weary to argue. But I didn't go to the pond. I crept toward the church instead, keeping to the hedges. The sun was going down, and the lane had that purple glow where everything looks soft but sharp at the same time. As I neared the stone wall, I saw a light moving among the graves. Not moonlight, but the glow of a hand lantern. A tall man in a long coat was kneeling by the corner where the children's graves lay. He set the lantern on the ground and brushed away dead leaves from one of the small markers. His coat shifted, and I caught the glint of something metal at his belt. Maybe a shovel, maybe something worse. I froze behind a yew tree and watched. He wasn't praying. He was measuring. I saw him take a bit of twine and lay it from one stone to another, as if checking the distance. Then he stood and wrote something in a small notebook. When he moved on, I slipped closer, crouching low. The stone he'd just touched was Ellen Graves, the first name I'd read in the hidden ledger. The man didn't notice me. He kept to his work, pacing the rows, measuring and jotting things down. Once he paused and looked toward the rectory window. The curtains twitched as though someone was watching him. Then he tipped his hat, a small nod before walking toward the lich gate. I darted after him, careful on the cobblestones, but he was fast despite his height. By the time I reached the lane, he was gone, lantern and all. The next morning, I went back to the corner of the yard. The earth by Ellen Graves's marker was freshly turned, not much, just enough to show someone had been scraping at it. A bit of sod lay loose, damp and dark. I knelt and poked at it with a stick, The dirt smelled raw, not like old ground. Someone had been there within hours. I told myself I'd find out who he was, not for mischief, not even for courage, but because, if I didn't, the question would eat me alive. So I followed Father Hanlon after school that day, when he walked to the parish office in town. I kept well back, ducking behind carts and doorways, but he didn't glance over his shoulder once. At the office door, a man stepped out to meet. Him, the same man with the lantern. They shook hands quickly and spoke low. I couldn't hear what they said, but I saw the man slip Father Hanlon an envelope thick enough to bulge. When they parted, I trailed the tall man instead. He crossed the market square, past the blacksmith's shop, and down to the Riverside Inn. I waited outside, pretending to skip stones, until he came out again with a heavy satchel. His coat swung open as he walked, and I saw the handle of a spade sticking from the satchel. So it had been a shovel I glimpsed at his belt after all. That night, after Ma was asleep, I slipped from the cottage and went back to the tower. My lantern shook in my hand, but I didn't care. I needed to copy the names from that secret ledger before someone removed it. I wedged myself in the hollow behind the bell and wrote fast, page after page, until my fingers cramped. When I reached the last entry again, the one about a living child sent away, I traced the ink with my thumb. No name, no clue, just a blank space where a life should be. I heard a creak below. The ladder groaned once, twice. My heart kicked. I doused the lantern and pressed myself against the wall. The steps stopped halfway up. A voice, low and calm, again floated up. "You're making this hard, boy. I'm not your enemy." It was the tall man. He was closer than before, his words echoing off the tower walls. "You don't know what you're looking at. Those aren't wicked deeds in that book. They're mercies." I gritted my teeth and said nothing. "Children who'd have been left to rot nameless, given Christian burials," he went on softly. "No harm meant. But if you meddle, harm will come. Do you understand?" I didn't answer. I only heard the slow scrape of his boots as he climbed down again. No rush, no anger. Like he already knew I'd listen in the end. When the sound faded, I packed my notes and crawled out the hatch to the roof again. The sky was clear, stars sharp as nails. I climbed down the drainpipe and ran home barefoot, my boots slung over my shoulder to keep from making noise. The next morning, before I could even hide my papers, Ma stormed into my room. Her face was white as flour. "Father Hanlon came by," she said. "He says you've been loitering round the church. He says you've been snooping." I tried to speak, but she grabbed my shoulders. "You stay away from that place, Rory. Promise me." I opened my mouth to promise, but outside, I heard hoofbeats, not hurried, just steady, as if someone was patrolling the lane. Ma went to the window, peeked, and yanked the curtain shut. "It's him," she whispered. "The man with the lantern. I saw him years ago after Patrick Gray vanished." Her voice trembled. "You don't understand. These people don't answer to the law. They are the law here." I looked at my crumpled pages. I looked at Ma's shaking hands. And I made my choice. I'd find out why those children lay under the wrong names and who that living child sent away really was. Even if it meant crossing Father Hanlon, even if it meant crossing the man with the lantern, because I couldn't shake the feeling that one of those graves wasn't as quiet as it looked. Murphy met me by the edge of the churchyard after dark, his spade slung over his shoulder and a grim set to his jaw. He didn't look drunk for once, which somehow made him scarier. His eyes were sharp, not clouded, and his voice didn't slur. "Do this quiet," he whispered. "No shouting, no running. If we're caught, we play stupid." I nodded, though my stomach churned. "Do you know where they're keeping the child?" "Not yet," Murphy said. "But I know where they'll bury him. Same corner as the others. They never change their habits." We slipped into the yard. The moon was thin, but enough to show the rows of crooked stones. I half expected to hear that faint crying again. But the night was still. We crouched by the children's graves, scanning for fresh earth. "There," Murphy muttered, pointing to a small mound beside William Kerr's marker. The soil was damp and loose. He knelt and pressed his hand to it. "Still warm," he said. "They were here less than an hour ago." My breath caught. "Then maybe he's still alive?" "Shut your mouth," Murphy growled, though not unkindly. He dug fast, flinging soil aside. I grabbed a broken board to help scrape. Within minutes, we hit cloth, the same coarse kind I'd seen, under that cart cover. Murphy's hands trembled as he brushed dirt away. He looked at me. "Ready yourself, lad." We pulled the bundle up. My heart hammered as I tore at the knots. But when the cloth opened, there was no living child, only a tiny body already cold and stiff, wrapped in an old church linen. Someone had tucked a wooden cross into the folds, as if to make it holy. I choked back a sob. "We're too late," Murphy swore under his breath. "The poor mite, not even his own name." We reburied him carefully, not because Hanlon deserved it, but because the child did. We marked the spot with a pebble only we'd know. Then Murphy wiped his hands and stood. "This changes things," he muttered. "I thought Hanlon was just giving nameless babes a Christian rest. But burying 'em fresh dead, or near enough, that's devil's work." Before I could answer, a voice called from behind us. "Step away from the grave, both of you." The man with the lantern stood by the gate, calm as always. His light cast long shadows across the stones. Father Hanlon wasn't with him this time, but somehow that was worse. Murphy straightened slowly, resting his weight on the spade. "Evening, friend," he said mildly. "Just checking my work." The tall man stepped closer. "You're interfering with things you don't understand." His eyes fixed on me. "Especially you, boy. I told you to leave it." "I know what you're doing," I shot back, my voice shaking, "and it's wrong." For the first time, his calm cracked. "Do you?" he said sharply. "Do you know how many children are born here with no one to claim them? Do you know what happens if they're buried outside consecrated ground? Their souls wander. Hanlon gives them names so they can rest. It's mercy, not murder. They're still alive sometimes when you put them under," I said hoarsely. He didn't deny it. He only sighed, as if I were stubborn rather than brave. "Some lives aren't meant to be lived. Better they go quick with a blessing than starve in a ditch." Murphy spat in the dirt. "Spare us your holy talk. That's not blessing. That's killing." The tall man's eyes hardened. "You've both seen too much, and I don't like repeating myself." He lifted the lantern higher, and for a moment, I thought he meant to swing it like a weapon. But he only held it steady, letting the light fall across Murphy's face, and then mine. "Go home," he said softly, "and pray." We didn't argue. We backed away slow out through the gate, and only when we hit the lane did we run. Murphy's breath rasped like a saw. Back at his cottage, he slammed the door and bolted it. "We've got to get proof," he said. "Something no priest's smooth tongue can talk away. If we just shout about it, they'll call us drunk or mad. But if we show what they've done..." He trailed off, rubbing his chin. "We'll need to catch 'em at it, alive." I thought about the faint cry I'd heard that first night. "They'll do it again soon," I whispered. "We just have to wait." Murphy shook his head. "We don't wait. We search." We started that very night. While the village slept, we prowled behind cottages, listening for whispers, watching for lantern light. We checked barns, sheds, and even the rectory cellar windows. Nothing. But just before dawn, we saw something that chilled us both. A woman leaving the rectory weeping, clutching an empty cradle. "She's lost her babe," Murphy muttered. "But why's she going to the priest instead of the doctor?" We followed her at a distance. She went straight home and barred her door, sobbing inside. We could hear her through the wall. No crying babe, just her voice, broken and low. By the next evening, word spread that her child had passed suddenly and would be buried in the morning. But I knew that wasn't true. I hadn't heard a church bell toll. Not once. And if Hanlon planned to bury the child secretly, it wouldn't be in daylight. Murphy and I agreed to watch the churchyard again. We hid in the yew trees at midnight, eyes fixed on the gate. Sure enough, the man with the lantern appeared, leading Father Hanlon and a cloaked figure carrying a bundle. This time I didn't wait. I darted from the trees, shouting, "Stop!" The cloaked figure froze. Hanlon cursed. The tall man dropped the lantern, and Murphy came charging out with his spade. "Leave the babe!" he roared. For a moment, no one moved. Then the cloaked figure, not Hanlon, not the tall man, thrust the bundle into my arms. "Take him," she sobbed. It was the weeping mother from before. Hanlon lunged, but Murphy swung his spade, catching the priest across the shoulder. The tall man reached for me, but I darted back, clutching the child tight. He was breathing. I could feel it. Weak, but alive. "Run, boy!" Murphy shouted. "Get him out of here!" I ran. Behind me I heard shouting, a crash of boots, the clang of steel on stone. I didn't dare look back. I tore through the lane toward our cottage, heart hammering, the baby's small warmth pressed against my chest. When I burst through the door, Ma shot up from her chair. "Rory, what have you—" Then she saw the bundle and her face went white. "No time to explain," I gasped. "Hide him!" She didn't argue. She snatched the child from my arms and tucked him in the coal bin, just as fists pounded on the door. "Open up!" came Father Hanlon's cold voice. "Now!" Ma glared at me, then yanked the door open a crack. "What's the meaning of this?" she demanded. The tall man's shadow loomed behind Hanlon. "Your boy's been stealing from the parish," the priest said smoothly. "We'll take him now." Ma blocked the doorway. "He's done nothing wrong." "Step aside, woman," the tall man said, his calm voice colder than ever. "Or we'll come in anyway." But Ma stood firm. "Not without a warrant," she said sharply, "and not while I draw breath." For a long moment no one moved, then Hanlon forced a smile. "Very well," he said softly. "We'll settle this tomorrow." They turned and left, but I knew they'd be back. And this time, they wouldn't just come for me. They'd come for the child, too. I didn't sleep much after that. Ma barred the door every night, muttering prayers under her breath, and I lay in bed staring at the rafters, listening for the sound of boots on the lane. But sleep has its own tricks, and sometimes it takes you even when you swear you'll keep your eyes open. It must have been past midnight when I woke to a sound I'd never heard before. Faint, thin, and far away, like a baby's cry carried on the wind. At first, I thought it was a fox. Ma always said foxes scream like children in the dark. But this was softer, more like whimpering, and it didn't fade or change pitch the way an animal's call would. It came in sharp little bursts, then stopped, dead, as though someone had put a hand over a mouth. I slipped out of bed and crept to the window. The moon was bright enough to make shadows of the hedge and the well. Everything else was still. No riders on the lane, no lanterns moving between houses. The sound came again, drifting from the direction of the churchyard. I pulled on my boots and eased the door latch. Ma's snores rattled softly from her room. Thank God for that. I ran bent low through the yard and up the track, heart banging in my chest. Every rustle in the ditch made me jump. When I reached the stone wall of the churchyard, I crouched and listened. Nothing, not a whisper, just the ash trees shifting. I climbed the wall anyway, scraping my palms on the rough stone and dropped onto the damp grass. My breath made little clouds in the cold air. The children's graves lay in the far corner, pale as teeth in the moonlight. I crept closer, scanning for movement. Then I saw it, a patch of earth on William Kerr's grave, fresh turned again, darker than the rest, and sticking up through the sod was something small and pale. I reached out, fingers shaking, and brushed. Away the dirt. It wasn't bone, not yet, it was cloth. A bit of baby's gown, yellowed with damp, as if something had been buried shallow and was working its way to the surface. The cry came again, louder now, but not from the ground. It floated from behind the church itself, near the vestry door. I whirled and saw a shape slip into the shadows, tall, with a swinging lantern. I didn't think. I just ran after him. My boots thudded on the grass, then on the flagstones. I rounded the corner and nearly collided with him. The man with the lantern stepped back, calm as ever, his face in shadow. "You don't learn, do you?" he said softly. I tried to dart past, but his hand shot out and grabbed my arm. Not rough, just firm, like iron. "You should be home. Boy, this is no hour for wandering." "What are you doing here?" I demanded. "Who's crying?" His grip tightened just enough to make me wince. "There's no crying," he said evenly. "You're imagining things. Best not to let your imagination run wild." I yanked my arm free and backed up. "I heard it, and I saw the ground. Someone's digging up the graves." The man tilted his head, the lantern glow catching his sharp cheekbones. "And if they are, would you rather those little ones lay forgotten? Would you rather their souls go unblessed?" "That's not blessing," I shot back. "It's lying." Something flickered in his eyes then. Not anger, more like disappointment. "You're young. You think truth is clean and shining, but truth is mud, Rory, and some mud sticks to you for life." Before I could answer, a window slammed open on the rectory. Father Hanlon leaned out in his nightshirt, his face pale and pinched. "What's going on out there?" he hissed. "Who's there?" The man with the lantern stepped back into the shadow, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "Go home now. If Hanlon sees you, you'll wish you'd stayed in bed." I ran. I didn't wait to see if the priest spotted me. I vaulted the churchyard wall and tore down the lane, my breath raw in my throat. By the time I reached our cottage, my knees were trembling. Inside, I shoved my notes and the copied names into the hearth, just in case someone searched the house. The paper curled and blackened in the flames. Ma woke to the smell of smoke and came stumbling out, hair loose, eyes wide. "What are you burning?" she demanded. "Nothing," I lied. "Just scraps." She stared at me a long moment, then said, "They'll know, Rory. They always know. Once you've seen too much, you're marked." I wanted to ask her what she meant, but she just turned away, her shoulders slumped like she was carrying a sack of stones. The next day, the whole village buzzed with whispers. A farmer said he'd seen someone riding away from the parish at dawn, cloaked and hooded. Mrs. Cullen, whose granddaughter's grave lay in that very corner, swore she heard a child laughing outside her window, though she lives alone. No one spoke outright of digging or cries, but everyone seemed uneasy. That afternoon, I went to see old Murphy, the gravedigger. He was half blind and smelled of whiskey, but he'd been tending that yard longer than anyone. I found him sharpening his spade behind the shed. "Murphy," I said, "you ever see anyone digging at night? Someone who doesn't belong?" He spat on the ground and squinted at me. "Boy, I don't see much of anything after sundown. Don't plan to neither." "Did you bury them?" I pressed. "Ellen Graves? Thomas Meade? William Kerr? Did you dig those plots yourself?" Murphy wiped his hands on his coat and leaned close. His breath stank. "I dug the holes. I didn't pick. The names. What do you mean?" But he just tapped the side of his nose and muttered, "Parish business," before shuffling off. That night I lay awake again, waiting. Around midnight, the wind shifted, carrying the smell of damp earth through the window crack. And then I heard it, the same thin, wrong cry, this time closer, not from the churchyard, but from down the lane, moving slowly toward our cottage. I crept to the door and peered through the slats. A lantern bobbed in the dark. Behind it came a cart, its wheels muffled with rags, drawn by a single horse, and in the cart, I swear I saw a shape no bigger than a child, covered by a cloth. The man with the lantern walked beside it, calm as ever, and Father Hanlon rode the horse. They passed without a word, heading toward the old quarry road, the one no one uses, because it's overgrown and dangerous. I waited until they were out of sight, then grabbed my coat. Whatever they were doing, I'd follow, even if it killed me, because by then I was sure the living child sent away wasn't some long ago secret. It was happening now. The night air bit my face as I tore down the lane after that cart. The lantern bobbed ahead, throwing long, crooked shadows across the hedgerows, and every so often I caught a glint of Father Hanlon's white collar in the dark. I stayed well, back, keeping to the ditch so my boots wouldn't clatter on the stones. The road they took was one I'd been warned about all my life, the old quarry track, where the ground sank soft in places and brambles tore at your sleeves. Ma always said to keep clear. Once you're in that hollow, no one in the village can hear you if you shout. The cart rolled slow, its wheels muffled by rags. Whoever was under that cloth in the back didn't move. I couldn't tell if it was a child or something else. My heart thudded so loud I was sure they'd hear me. After a mile, the track dipped between two high banks, and the moon vanished behind the trees. I slipped closer. Their lantern stopped swinging. They'd halted. I heard Father Hanlon murmur, something I couldn't make out. Then the man with the lantern, the tall one, jumped down from the cart and fetched his spade. I ducked behind a boulder as they dragged the cloth-covered shape off the cart and laid it on the ground. Hanlon knelt beside it, muttering Latin, words that sounded like prayers. The tall man just stood with his lantern watching. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then the cloth shifted, only a little, but enough to make my blood go cold. Whatever was under there wasn't dead. I must have made some sound, a gasp, maybe, because the tall man's head snapped toward me. He didn't shout or chase. He just took one slow step in my direction, like a wolf scenting something. I bolted. Branches whipped my face as I scrambled up the bank and into the trees. Behind me, I heard Father Hanlon call sharply, "Who's there?" And the tall man's calm voice answering, "Leave him. I'll fetch him later." I didn't stop running till I burst out on the main road, lungs on fire. I didn't go home. I couldn't lead them there. Instead, I hid behind Murphy's shed till dawn, shaking so hard my teeth rattled. When I crept back into our cottage in the gray morning, Ma was waiting, pale and wild-eyed. "Where have you been?" she hissed. "They came asking at first light. Hanlon himself, he says." "You've been spying on holy work. What have you done, Rory?" "Holy work?" I spat. "They're burying children alive." Ma's hand flew to her mouth. "God save us," she whispered. "Don't ever say that where anyone can hear. You don't know what you're talking about." "I know what I saw," I shot back. "There was someone breathing under that cloth." "He moved!" She grabbed my shoulders, trembling. "Listen to me. You keep quiet, or you'll end up like Patrick Gray. You think he ran off to sea? He's under one of those stones in the yard, and you'll be next if you don't stop." Her words turned my stomach to ice. All at once I understood why the villagers whispered but never spoke outright. They were all afraid. Afraid of the priest. Afraid of the man with the lantern. Afraid of whatever bargain kept the parish running smooth while children disappeared under false names. I spent the day hiding my copied pages, the ones I hadn't burned, under a loose board beneath my bed. That ledger told the truth, and if I vanished like Patrick Gray, someone had to know. By evening, the village buzzed with talk. A woman from the next parish claimed she'd lost her baby to a fever, yet no burial was ever recorded. Murphy the Yew gravedigger muttered to himself louder than usual, cursing long coats with soft hands, and Mrs. Cullen wouldn't leave her cottage at all. That night, I made a plan. If they meant to bury a living child, I'd stop them. I didn't know how. I had no weapon, no proof, only my own eyes and a wild fear that made me reckless. waited until Ma dozed off, then crept out again. The moon was thin as a sickle, but I knew the way to the quarry road by heart now. When I reached the hollow where they'd stopped, I crouched low and listened. Voices, not far off. I crept forward and saw them again. Father Hanlon, the tall man with his lantern, and now another figure I didn't recognize, a younger man holding a bundle. They stood by a fresh-dug pit, the lantern throwing long shadows over their faces. The bundle twitched. This time there was no mistaking it. A faint whimper carried through the night. Hanlon made the sign of the cross and said sharply, "Do it quick!" I couldn't just stand there. I grabbed a loose rock and hurled it with all my strength. It clanged off the lantern pole, shattering the glass and plunging them into darkness. The child wailed louder now. "Who's there?" Hanlon shouted. "Run!" I yelled. Not at them, but at whoever was in that bundle, though I knew a baby couldn't run. The tall man cursed under his breath, and I bolted again, crashing through the undergrowth. This time they chased me. I heard boots pounding behind me, snapping branches. I twisted through the woods, heart hammering until I saw the faint glow of a cottage window up ahead. Without thinking, I banged on the door. Old Murphy opened it, blinking in surprise. "They're after me," I gasped. His rheumy eyes flicked past me to the dark trees. "Get in, boy," he muttered, shoving me inside. We crouched in silence as footsteps thudded past. Through the cracks in the shutters, I saw the tall man pause, lantern shard still glinting in his fist. He stared at Murphy's door a long moment before moving on. When it was quiet again, Murphy fixed me with his bleary gaze. "What have you done, lad?" "They're burying a living child," I panted. "You've got to help me stop them." He sighed, sank onto his stool, and rubbed his face. "You think I don't know? I dug half those holes. But you don't understand. It's not murder. It's choosing who gets a name and who doesn't." "What do you mean?" I demanded. Murphy's voice dropped to a whisper. "Some babes are born wrong. No kin, no baptism, no coin for burial. The priest gives them false names so they can lie in consecrated ground. Better that than be left to the crows." "That's not what I saw," I shouted. "They're not dead yet. When they're put in the ground." Murphy's hands trembled. "Then it's worse than I thought," he muttered. "Hanlon's gone too far. And if the man with the lantern's involved—" "Lad, you're in over your head." I swallowed hard. "Will you help me?" The old gravedigger looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "Meet me tomorrow night. If they've got another child, we'll see about setting it right. But Rory, don't breathe a word of this to your ma. If they know you've got help, we'll both end up in the ground." When I slipped home at dawn, Ma was waiting, in the doorway, eyes red from crying. "They came again," she whispered. "Said if you keep nosing around, they'll make it look like an accident." I tried to comfort her, but all I could think about was the bundle twitching under that cloth, the faint cry cut. Off too soon. I didn't tell her I'd made a pact with Murphy, because I knew, by the next night, either we'd save that child, or we'd join the others under the wrong names. The air in St. Matthew's Parish had grown thicker, not just with the summer humidity, but with something else. Something no one dared name. I walked along the cobblestone road leading to the churchyard, my shoes scraping against the uneven stones. Every sound seemed louder than it should be. Even the crows that usually perched on the gateposts were quiet, as if they too had overheard something they shouldn't. Father Callahan was gone, not dead, but sent away for what the bishop called a period of reflection and rest. That's what they told the parishioners during Mass, but I knew it wasn't true. I'd seen the argument between him and Mr. Corbett, the parish clerk, in the vestry. It was more than just words. It was a warning. Father Callahan had shouted, "You'll answer for this one day," and then, just as quickly, realized I was standing there and walked out without another glance. By dawn, he was gone from town. Everyone acted as if nothing had happened. People still knelt in the pews, candles still burned before the altar, and bells still tolled on the hour. But I knew things were changing, even if no one wanted to admit it. The wrong names were still there. On the graves, in the parish records, carved into stone as if to seal the lie forever. One evening, as I walked home from the bakery, I heard whispers near the graveyard wall. Two men I recognized from the church. Counsel, Mr. Corbett and Deacon Harlow were standing under the elm tree, speaking low and fast. I crouched in the ditch to hear them. "They're asking questions again," Corbett said. "The boy won't let it go." "Leave him," Harlow muttered. "Children forget quickly." "No," Corbett replied sharply. "This one doesn't forget. And now people are starting to talk. The O'Malley woman swears her baby wasn't baptized under that name. If the bishop looks too closely, everything we've done, everything we've covered—" "Keep your voice down," Harlow hissed. "Do you want someone hearing?" I pressed myself deeper into the mud, heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. What had they done? Why were they afraid of names on graves? That night I didn't sleep. I kept thinking of the rows of tiny headstones, all lined up perfectly, all so quiet. I thought of how Father Callahan used to walk through them at dusk. His head bowed, lips moving as if apologizing to each one. I didn't know what he knew, but I understood now why he was sent away. The next Sunday, something strange happened. After Mass, instead of dispersing to the market as usual, people lingered in the churchyard. They formed small knots of conversation, glancing over shoulders, speaking in low tones. A rumor was spreading, fast. Someone claimed they'd seen workers digging in the church basement at night. Someone else swore they'd seen Father Callahan boarding a carriage, pale and shaking, escorted by two men who weren't from our town. I tried to slip past unnoticed, but Mrs. Finnerty caught me by the arm. Her grip was stronger than you'd expect for an old woman. "You've been poking around," she said. "I can see it in your eyes. Be careful, lad. This parish buries more than bodies." Before I could ask what she meant, she shuffled away into the crowd. That night, I made up my mind I was going to find out what was hidden in that church. I waited until the moon rose high and the streets emptied. Carrying only a lantern, I crept around the side of the building. The vestry door was locked, but the window above the coal chute had a loose latch. I squeezed through, landing in the dark basement with a soft thud. The air was damp and smelled of earth, not stone, as if something had been disturbed recently. My lantern's glow fell on a pile of wooden boards stacked against the far wall. At first, I thought they were for repairs, until I saw the carved letters. These were headstones, but they weren't old and weathered. They were new, crisp, names etched freshly in the stone. And they didn't match any of the graves I'd seen outside. Why were there extra headstones down here? Whose names were on them? I brushed the dust off one. Ellen McCreary. Another. Patrick Donnelly. Both names I remembered hearing in whispers, children who'd died of fever years ago. But outside, their graves bore different names entirely. I froze when I heard footsteps overhead. Someone was in the church at midnight. I doused the lantern and crouched behind the altar table. The footsteps came closer, slow and deliberate, like someone who knew exactly where they were going. Then I heard voices. "Move them tonight," a man said, "before anyone else notices." "It's risky," another replied. "But if we don't, the bishop will send an investigator." I realized they were coming down the stairs. My heart hammered. If they found me here, I wouldn't just get scolded. I might disappear like Father Callahan. The door creaked open. A beam of light swept across the room. I held my breath so long my lungs burned. "There," the first man said, pointing at the stack of headstones. "Take those and get them into the wagon." I couldn't see their faces, but I knew one of the voices. It was Mr. Corbett. He and another man loaded the headstones, grunting as they lifted each one. When they left, I stayed hidden until the sound of wheels faded down the road. When I finally crawled out the window and ran home, I had mud on my clothes and questions burning in my head. Where were they taking those headstones? Why replace names on graves at all? The next morning, the parish woke to something it hadn't seen in years. A silent procession. Women stood in doorways, men took off their caps, and no one spoke above. A whisper. Down the main road rolled a black wagon, covered with a tarp. I knew what was under it. Corbett rode at the front, his face pale but set. They weren't taking bodies to the graveyard, they were taking truth out of town. But I wasn't. Going to let them bury it forever.